Today, Jagex announced they will be raising the Grand Exchange tax from 1% to 2%. This is a way bigger deal than you might think, and in this video, I am going to discuss what you need to know about this new tax, the effect that this tax has on the RuneScape economy, and why raising the tax is ultimately bad for the game. If you don't know me, my name is Scapenomics, and I have been teaching OSRS flipping since 2016, so I like to think I have a decent understanding of how the Grand Exchange works. The GE tax was first introduced in December of 2021, at a rate of 1% on all items sold above 100 GP, to a max tax of 5 million. This means that for items sold above 500 mil, the maximum tax you'd end up paying is still 5 mil. With the move to a 2% tax, the maximum tax cap will now be reached at items trading at or above the 250 mil GP mark. In addition, now items under the 50 GP mark will not be subject to tax, which is down from the previous 100 GP exception. Some items where a tax is collected are subject to an item sink policy, which means a portion of the tax that is collected is put towards the Grand Exchange purchasing and deleting an item from the game. I'll put a full list of these items which are subject to the sink in the description. How this sink works is that every time the Grand Exchange collects tax on these items, the tax money is stored into a coffer for that specific item. The coffer continues to fill with the tax money until the price of the coffer is equal to the trading price of the item. To visualize this concept simply, let's use an actual item subject to the item sink, the dark bow. On average, about 1,500 dark bow trades occur daily. Assuming a dark bow is sold for 1 mil each, every trade deducts a percent tax on the sell offer, which is now 2%. So that's going to be 20k for every single dark bow sold at 1 mil. When the Grand Exchange collects the tax money, it moves the money to the coffer for the dark bow. When that coffer fills to the current price of the dark bow, there is some technical logic that occurs to decide if the item should be sunk or not. According to some info from Mod Ash, an item is sunk roughly at a 50% rate, so when the coffer fills, one of two things occurs. The first thing is that the Grand Exchange auto purchases one of the available dark bows on the market and deletes the item known as an item sink. The second thing that can occur is the Grand Exchange decides not to auto purchase and it deletes all the gold in the coffer, effectively sinking the gold instead of sinking the item. A lot of people are obsessed with the sink part of the economy, and let me show you how this affects the game overall. Let's use the same prices as before with the dark bow. On average, roughly 1,500 dark bows are traded daily. Because an item is only sunk half the time the coffer is filled, we can assume that for every 100 trades, one dark bow will be sunk, meaning 15 dark bows are sunk daily, or 1% of the total daily trade volume. Keep in mind that the 15 dark bow total is double the amount that was previously sunk, as with the new 2% tax, the coffer fills twice as fast as before and sinks double the amount of bows. In conclusion here, every item on the sink list will now be removed roughly twice as fast as before, and if you know anything about economics, if supply decreases but demand stays the same, price must rise to limit demand. So in reality, if you're removing the liquid supply of items, less of an item means less trades, and less trades means more price volatility. I just launched a RuneScape investment newsletter, which points out the best item investments I find within the game every single month. So if you're someone who wants to make long-term investments in-game, but don't have the time or expertise to find good opportunities, consider checking out my Patreon page with the link in the description below. I also have written flipping guides, item flipping lists, and an example newsletter that you can view completely for free. Anyway, back to the video. I don't want to dive too deep into theory here, but essentially, if there are less trades that are happening on the Grand Exchange, there are going to be larger margin spreads or gaps between the buy and sell prices. This in turn leads to larger price swings and an increase in price uncertainty and a decrease in market depth or number of players trying to trade an item. Overall, flipping keeps item prices stable, which I've explained in other videos, so this affects the average player the most, because the average player who does not focus on the economy will be paying more to buy an item and receive less when selling an item, and that does not even include the effect of tax. If you want to learn more about this, I'll explain this a little bit deeper in a pinned comment. The new tax will only affect flippers and merchers very slightly, as active price margins will adjust to accommodate for the tax, just like they did in 2021. So profit will still roughly be the same, although more risk will have to be taken on for all of these flips, as less trades are going to happen and more tax has to be paid. Long-term merching is affected too, but only from the standpoint that when selling the mercher will be subject to a higher tax, therefore reducing their overall profit margin very slightly. So who is actually benefiting the most from tax? Well, this is unfortunately gold sellers, because if there is less gold overall circulating in the economy, that makes each piece of gold more valuable, meaning that the real-life dollar value of gold does increase. You might argue that bots still have to sell on the Grand Exchange, so they're still going to pay a tax, and that is true, but keep in mind that a lot of bot farms, like Revenant bot farms for example, generate a lot of their gold from alked items. Tax is deflationary. It takes gold out of the economy, which means that technically, if you don't do anything with your gold is worth more now than it was yesterday. But in the long run, since you will be interacting with the Grand Exchange most likely, you're going to lose out on the larger margin spread costs as well as the 2% tax slowly eating into your cash stack over time. Finally, let's keep the primary goal of OSRS in mind, keeping players having fun and growing the player base. In my opinion, it's not a great feeling as a player when you have to pay a tax in a video game. That's my personal opinion, of course, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels that way. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, this is my own analysis of how I believe taxes do and will continue to affect the economy in OSRS. Be sure to leave a comment with your own analysis or point out some things I missed, because tax affects all of us and we need to get this right as a community before we can suggest accurate solutions. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.